Well, here we are. We're between Christmas and New Year's, and we just wanted to express to the public how much this last year has meant to us. I mean, there was just so much happened this year. Seems like every year is the same, especially since the pandemic. Things seem to alter every year. Has there been a special challenge or something that happened this year at the food bank that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, you asked me this question before, and I think the word that kept coming up in my head was more. There was more people, there was more volunteers, there was more donations, there was just, the public was there, there was more need, there was more division within the community, a whole bunch of different things, and it just felt like more of kind of everything, in both good ways and bad ways. So yeah. I think, I think from a public perspective, definitely it was amazing. It was great in terms of the numbers of volunteers and the kinds of volunteers we had, and just the ability to make a difference was really great.
Yeah, I mean, the volunteers might be the big story. I mean, I think, things were total this year, and we found out we had a database of around 3,000 people, and we know we have over 1,000 more out in the community, but I think at least. So we chose this year to start a little show, a video show called Volunteer Corner, in which we interviewed a different volunteer as went along, and you did them down at the food bank, which to me was so great, because I think people know what goes on in the community. They say the firefighters have a food drive, right? Or a service club is doing something for the food bank. But a lot of people don't see what volunteers do at the food bank. So you were interviewing them all individually. And some of them had pretty hilarious stories, right? Some of them were like summer students who were in helping us, who are really interested now in moving on in that career because of what they experienced there. And a whole bunch of them became friends. Right.
Yeah, well, they became friends down at the food bank, and
right.
They kind of connected with one another and kind of shared generosity.
Yeah, and some of them talked about how one in particular couple of women, their families now go off on holidays together and that kind of stuff. And I think that's really great. I mean, the amount of people that started coming to us to volunteer really began to increase during the pandemic. But the fact that they've stayed and made such a difference is great. Anything else stick out to you?
No, I still think the more, when you talk about the food bank, and the food bank is all of these different things, we took on more responsibility in terms of assisting some other agencies a little bit deeper this year. Now it was obviously because the public had given us more, and we felt the need to kind of spread the wealth in that context. But I don't know, I had been starting to talk about food security and the real need for the community to kind of feed itself. And it wasn't just all about the food bank per se, which is more about individual insecurity, about food security. But it feels like this other thing with regards to agencies and just the difficulties kind of in many ways overtaken that a little bit this year, just in terms of our focus. I still think food security for a whole community is incredibly important, and that's why we're involved in things like the greenhouses or the containers, the farm in a box, the Food Policy Council, and even some of the food recovery things we do. But it just feels that the community itself, and from the social service side, it's been really, really difficult.
Yes, I think for you and I, we feel it in different ways, but it's the same story. For you, the increase in the need of agencies, or just in the number of agencies that are now coming to us for help. I mean, it's a huge amount, and they're having trouble making a go of it. So they come and see if we can help them with their food budgets, or just with food or gift cards or whatever, or with things like Harvest Bucks, which the food bank is a big supplier of. I've watched you over the course of this last year as you're trying to find ways to manage that consistent demand that's not coming in from agencies. So this isn't just one family that's coming in for help. This can be another agency that's trying to feed 300 people. So, and they're needing our help to do it. And for me, I have felt that same thing, but it's different. I think I went into the year, really trying to help the food bank to move towards a more food secure system. I mean, as long as you keep depending on donations, it's going to be hard for a city to really find food security. So that's why we did the greenhouses, as you said, or farm in a box. But to me, the food security was the way of developing food where we could grow it ourselves within London. Didn't have to depend so much on the system that exists.
And it's huge, and it's incredibly important.
That's correct, but we can't get to it. We're trying, and there's still the odd project that's going on, but there's so much pressure on the food insecurity side, the people that are in need, that we have to turn ourselves towards that. And that's been a bit of a difficult thing for me from the standpoint that I really want to pursue the food security part. But it just wasn't going to happen. On the other hand, we also hear from Food Banks Canada that put out a report there in December, and in which it talked about that 35% of the food banks in Canada are either having to ration or will be closed down altogether in the coming year. How did that hit you?
It hit me it was tough in many ways.
Yeah.
It's tough because, other food banks, like we're kind of all in this together. So though London Food Bank is 100% fine with regards to we're sustainable, the public has been great,
Yeah.
but we're still part of a food bank network and we share with each other. So it's like speaking on behalf of the people who come to us. The people who come to us are not doing well.
Yeah.
The need has just like burgeoned. It's basically doubled. And you're asking communities to do the things that governments in part used to do, but which families used to do, or institutions used to do, and not just governments. A lot of our institutions don't do some of those same things anymore. Some of the community that had been involved in serving just has not had the ability to do it either.
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult. There's a side to which I look at the growth of the food bank movement, and I haven't liked it very much over the past number of years, and only from the context of we all are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we are pretty much a multi-million-dollar institution across the country. We're almost a secondary food system, and that really scares me because we're never meant to be that. We were just meant to be a community response, but we've all gotten fairly large.
Yeah. And I think that's where the food security comes in. How do you handle that? Just as a food bank, do you just keep going along with it and watching things grow? Or do you try to promote, with not just within yourself, but with other groups, the idea of let's find alternative ways of growing food, and also for people to be able to have the funds to be able to afford food? This gets us into the area of public policy. But unless we can get into those areas, and I think what you're talking about, this kind of ceaseless growth, just seems to keep going on.
Yeah, I mean, we basically look at who's coming and helping us and helping everyone. And that's to some degree why some of those other food banks are either close to closing or rationing, is because it's not always about food. Sometimes it's about the people resources, right?
Yeah.
It's in the basement of the church, and it'd been 70-year-old, it'd been retired folks running it, running food up and down stairs and just can't do it anymore. And I think there is a place for community care. I 100% agree with that. I think that there's a need for us to show compassion and to do it in a tangible way. Citizens volunteering, giving food, and participating in getting that food to people who need it. But it's definitely been overwhelming for across the country.
Yeah. And we have watched, not from the sidelines, but from at the front lines, as governments have begun to cut back on funding of the nonprofit sector. And I think that that's a really important piece. I mean, decades ago, governments made the decision to contract with the nonprofit sector to provide services to help people who are homeless or whatever. But now there's a real cutting back of that. And we're watching in London has really become an issue as that cutting of the nonprofit sector continues then to put not just the agencies at risk, but the people that they're helping, right? I mean, if that agency can't keep running to the degree that it did before, then people are struggling with that. And I think you and I have watched this taking place, spoken with different groups that are really feeling it. And it's hard, and it's not just the local city council. They're also finding trouble with the province and with the feds. But so you realize that these people aren't just coming to you to get resources. They're actually trying to survive. And they're trying to survive in a system where they used to be really funded to carry out those services. And now as those fundings are being cut back, it's difficult. The food bank doesn't take government funding. So we just work with the public and with businesses and others. So in that sense, we're a bit removed from that, but we do work directly with dozens of agencies who are finding that problem. So I think I worry about that. What do you see the coming years being like that? More? Is that what you're going to say?
Well, that's just it. I don't really know. I mean,
Sure.
It is potentially scary, with regards to, let's say, the change of government, the threat of tariffs, the economy. There's a side to which, still you read the reports about how in the G7 our economy is still the best poised, versus all the other ones. But I don't really know. There seems to be this real divide between the have and the have-nots that we kind of were working to diminish, but it seems to be going a different way, and it's not just economically. There just seems to be a real divide between the left and the right, and just all sorts of different things. And I think that worries me, because when we're divided, we can't come together to solve our problems. We just point fingers.
Yeah, and the problem is that we're not observers to that. Like we see it, and we hear people's opinions, but you see the effects of it directly at the front lines. And that's a difficult thing for anybody to watch, regardless of what your persuasion is, because Canada is known as a fair-minded place, right?
Yeah.
But we're losing some of that edge, and we know it. I do think, though, that, Jane, we've been through a December that was phenomenal. Again, people supported us, but Business Cares had a whopper every year. They had a 9% increase over the year before, which is great. But when you look at all the stuff that comes in throughout the year from all these different groups, plus the food bank networks that we have, the working with grocery stores, citizens, faith groups, I mean, it goes on and on and on. There's a huge bulk of the food that comes in during that rest of the year when we really need it, right? It's really difficult. So I think having a talk like this right now, I mean, it's an honest talk. It's a bit easier to have that discussion when your warehouse is full.
Yeah, for sure.
From what has happened in December. If we had this discussion again, maybe in March or something before the next food drive, we would begin to see the effects of what's going on. But I must admit, you and I you don't look like it, but you and I are kind of the grandfather and the grandmother of the food bank movement. We're going into our 40th year.
Yeah.
In October, it will be 40 years. We've been around a long time, and it's hard to see the food banks that we have worked with through all of that time struggling just to survive. It's hard to see the agencies, large and small, in London struggling in order to survive. It's hard to see a city council in London, for all of the divisions and stuff it has. It's up against so much because they're not getting the resources from the province and the feds the way that they're supposed to. So they too are struggling to survive and to try to help to stop these problems. On the other hand, the public has been so good to us that we're not facing a lot of those constraints, but we are now trying to take what we have and distribute it out into the system in ways that will relieve the pressure, not in a permanent way, but in a temporary way. If an agency comes to you and says that they want to help, overall, you don't help them permanently, do you?
No. I mean, we're not trying to pick winners and losers. Yeah. We're trying to say, what have we got? What can we do to help? And basically work with other institutions to assist with some of those things. I think, there's some core agencies that we have traditional relationships with. We really believe in keeping going. Some of those, like let's say the Salvation Army, have segued into something new. So we're kind of excited to figure out how that relationship's
and how we can help.
Can help. But they still will be involved in food some way, and they'll still do Christmas. So we'll still help. We'll still figure those things out. But we're not. And I think the United Way does great work, but we're not the United Way of food. We still do the bulk of the work itself. Mm-hmm. And it's more that the public has given us money to assist people with food and food insecurity and whatever means. So sometimes that is about helping groups so people don't come to the food bank, right? Or to try to help groups in ways such that people can, let's say, find work or find other things. So to try to deal with like deeper issues. I don't know. We just basically, I don't want to say we run by the seat of our pants, because we don't. But it is. But
times are kind of forcing us
into that. At times, the pandemic was like that. Yeah. But I think we make we make our choices, and we do them based on values, and we also do them based on generosity and what people have given us. So we look at that and we give, and then, I mean, we still feed 16,000 people a month. So we got to make sure that keeps going as well.
That was maybe the biggest revelation of the year, is that we're feeding 10% of London through ourselves and the other agencies that we insist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one. There are two big things, though. I think one is the generosity that you saw in December. This doesn't happen in December here in London. People give throughout the year. It's been awesome. But the other is the volunteers. And by that I mean, most food banks our size have maybe 25, 30 staff, right?
Maybe more.
Maybe more, that's right. And we know some that do. We have 9. Now, Jane hires some people in on a contract on a temporary basis to help if we have a need for some. But we have 9 staff. That allows us, I think, to not only save on costs from more staff or whatever it is, but it also allows us to take our volunteers, many who've been with us, people like Peter Garland and others, but Peter's been with us for almost 40 years himself. So we're able to empower those individuals to take leadership roles in the organization and to do it. But I don't know if we were having to pay for a staff of, say, 30. I'm not sure we would be able to give these good news reports. It would be very difficult, but we don't have to do that just because our volunteers are so very amazing. And that, I think that really came out for me. That was probably the biggest thing of the year, is that all of that army of volunteers finally got their own program on YouTube. We were able to recognize them, but then CBC came down twice there in December. The volunteers all came in. People got a chance to see them. So it's kind of their time. They're coming out and showing, yes, we know that the needs are great, but we've always been there. We're always helping. But this year they finally got a bit more recognition. It was great. So London, we appreciate it very much. It does look, as Jane said, it's just going to be more. And 2025 is going to be the same. But we're not looking at it from a feeling of a lack of confidence or anything else. I think we're looking at is, how can we manage your generosity in a way that has the best effect throughout the city? And Jane, that's more of your responsibility, but I think we talk about it all the time. We get up in the morning, have coffee, talk about it and talk about it. We're lifers when it comes to this stuff. We really care for the community as you do. But I think it's going to be a real challenge again, so we'll just keep updating you as what's going on.
Yeah, but thanks for an amazing 2024.
And it was amazing considering the times. Thanks, everyone, and Happy New Year.